Wow, I don't think I noticed this the last time I was here. This is really, really neat. I'm Jessica, the museum guide, and today I'm at one of the world's most important and impressive museums, the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Now this is part 2 of a 2-part video, so make sure you go and watch part 1 to get the full context. On today's tour, we are going to be touring the final 2 galleries of the Acropolis Museum, classical statues until the end of antiquity, and the pièce de résistance, the Parthenon Gallery. If you haven't yet watched part 1, now's the time to go and do so, as I will be explaining a lot about the history of the Acropolis itself there. Of course, in this video, we'll also talk about all of the controversies and history and how so much of these sculptures ended up in London and beyond. Now, whether you're planning a trip to Athens or you just want to experience the museum from the comfort of your sofa, this tour is for you. If you're new to my channel, welcome! I'm absolutely delighted to have you here, and I hope you'll stick around. If you'd like more content, including an extra video tour every month, access to my archives, ad-free videos, and in-person free tours every year, head on over to my Patreon. I've linked it above and below. I cover all kinds of cool and weird museums that I don't put on my main channel. We're starting here in the gallery called From the 5th Century BC to the End of Antiquity. The items in this gallery relate to the social and political character of the Acropolis from the 5th century BC to the end of antiquity, including international relations. So let's go have a look. Wow, I mean, just wow. This has got to be one of my favorite pieces of art here, or anywhere really. This is the head of Aphrodite, probably. Her polished face is meant to evoke the ivory of a luxurious chryselephantine statue. That is, one made of ivory and gold, but at the lower cost of marble. That said, her eyes are indeed ivory, and her irises are black stone. And while it looks like she is very dramatic, the sculptor didn't mean for that. Her tears actually come from oxidization, because her eyelashes were originally made of bronze. Over time, the oxidization of that metal reacted with moisture, and we get these poetic tears. This is one of the later pieces from our entire tour today, dating probably to the 2nd century AD, but it's likely a copy of a much earlier statue from the 4th or 5th century BC. This is a rare survivor of a dedication from the 5th century BC, and it shows the harrowing moment after Prokne kills her son Itys. You can see here the outline of the little boy as he tries to find solace and protection from his mother, but she would have originally held a knife in her hand. Prokne was a mythic Athenian human princess married to the king of Thrace, Tiberius. However, Tiberius was more attracted to her sister, Philomela. He forced himself on Philomela and locked her away, even cutting out her tongue to prevent her from talking about the brutal rape. Philomela wove the story into a tapestry and sent it to Prokne, and in order to exact revenge on her cad of a husband, she kills their only son. Then she and Philomela cooked Itys's body and fed it to Tiberius. When Tiberius asked where his son was, they gleefully presented his bloody, decapitated head. Tiberius tried to hunt the ladies down, but the gods turned the 3 into birds. Tiberius became a hoopoe, a bird with a distinctive feathery crown like a warrior's helmet and a whooping battle cry, and turned Philomela into a swallow and Prokne into a nightingale known for her sorrowful song. This statue was carved around the time when the Peloponnesian War broke out. Prokne is the perfect example of a woman who put her own paternal family over the new family she had made with her husband, and that reminded Athenians to be loyal to Athens. The magic sphere is one of the strangest objects in the Acropolis Museum. Well, maybe in any museum, really. Look, it's covered with celestial symbols, but not a lot is known about them. The human image here is agreed to be Helios, and we can see that he is sitting atop a grand throne. He is Cosmocrator here, the ruler of the universe. In one hand he has a whip, and in the other 3 lit torches, and there are 2 dogs at his feet. The dog with the halo is almost certainly Sirius. There is also a lion above, as well as a snake. These are fire or sun symbols. The only word visible is the word ether. the first of the 5 ancient Greek elements. Archaeologists believe that it is a magical object connected to the worship of Helios. Since it was found in the theater of Dionysus, they believe it could be associated with a magical rite that would occur in a theater context, or perhaps in a sporting contest. Both took place at that theater. Wow, and just look at all these gold coins that have been found there as well. Fascinating. They are of the Byzantine Emperor Constans, who spent the winter of 662 in Athens, and we think that's when the coins were deposited here. Here is a true symbol of Greek national pride, Alexander the Great, instantly recognizable because of his head of curls called anastoli. Another tell that this is Alexander the Great are his eyes, which are deep set and gazing upwards. This is intentional. Alexander is almost never looking straight ahead. He instead looks upwards towards conquest and glory, or maybe just towards a lot of drama. Now, he is young here. He hasn't yet ascended the Macedonian throne, and he may have still been being tutored by Aristotle. This was likely created during his one visit to Athens when he was 18 years old, which was in 338 BC. Less than a decade later, the great general will have built an empire that stretched from Greece to India, responsible for what is called the Hellenization or Greekification of the ancient world, leaving his mark on the language, art, and philosophy across Asia, Europe, and Africa. And even with missing most of his nose, we can tell that he was still very handsome. It is considered a work of Leochares, who also sculpted other images of Alexander at the sanctuaries of Olympia and Delphi. But some experts argue that it was actually created in the 2nd century, long after his death. The statue was found in 1886 near the Erechtheion and was probably an honorific dedication after the Battle of Chaeronea, a city that had recently been defeated by his father, Philip II's army. Wow, just look at this huge monolithic head sculpture of Artemis Brauronia. This was from her sanctuary that was near the Propylaea and the Temple of Nike. The most unusual aspect of the sanctuary of Artemis Brauronia was the practice of the little bears. Now, bears were the favorite animal of the goddess, it is said, and upon their 10th birthday, little girls would go to live for a time at the sanctuary and dress in yellow chitons, which were said to resemble bear fur. This was a symbolic passage from their childhood into womanhood. It's just quite strange. While some people love to refer to this long-haired, beatific chap as Jesus, he actually isn't. This is a bust of a ruler, likely Tiberius Julius Sauromates II, king of the Cimmerian Bosphorus, in what is today Crimea. He lived from the late 2nd to early 3rd century AD, or it could potentially actually be his father, Metalcus. He often gets described with adjectives like dreamy, sensual, or passionate, but I think he just looks quite peaceful and content. Let's look at the back of his head. We can actually see the remnants of a few very faint carved acanthus leaves. He is supposed to look like he is emerging from a flower as a symbol of rebirth. This lets us know that this was a posthumous sculpture and that the subject has died, meaning this was created after he died. Now, this is the Atarbos Base. It was a base for a much larger statue. I love this because we're basically witnessing a dance-off taking place. Okay, we're actually at 2 different dance competitions, but dancing competitions were actually really common in ancient Greece. Now, over here on the left, we can see a group of 7 men in hamations. They have them kind of bundled up around them, and they're performing a circular dance called a kyklios. Then, on the right, there are 7 youths, naked except for their helmets and shields, and they are dancing the periklios. We know this because the dances are mentioned by name in the inscription. There are also a few women standing between the 2 groups. Some believe that these women personify competition. We know that the boys on the right are meant to be at the Pan-Athenaea, a festival held in Athena's honor, because she is said to have been the first to ever perform the periklios after defeating the giants. I love imagining Athena doing like a little touchdown dance. Museums like this one are places of intrigue and mystery. If you like museums, you'll love the sponsor of today's video, June's Journey. In this fun and relaxing game, you step into the shoes of June Parker and solve hidden object mysteries in the world of the Roaring Twenties. Now, they say as we get older, brain puzzles help us to sharpen our wits, and June's Journey is all about using your observation skills. Then you get to decorate your island. And here's mine. I've built my own world here. It's like your own personal museum collection, allowing me to engage my brain instead of just mindlessly scrolling. I find the storylines really mysterious and engaging as well. I also love the in-game seasonal content and special events. They really tie in with my interests. Join me over on June's Journey. Download the game on the link below or by clicking this QR code. June's Journey is available on iOS and Android devices and also on PC. Remember, please download the game from the link below or this QR code. That way they know that I sent you. Now let's get back to the museum. Now let's make our way upstairs to the Parthenon Gallery. No building epitomizes the story of ancient Greece like the Parthenon, which means the Virgin's apartment. It's one of the largest Doric temples ever completed in Greece. It was commissioned by the Athenian statesman Pericles and designed by Iktinos and Callicrates. It took 15 years to build, which really doesn't seem that long for how amazing it was, but it was completed in time for the Greek Panathenaic festival of 438 BC. The monument commemorates the triumph over the Persians and was where the Athenians kept their most iconic piece of art, the statue of Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, which stood at its center. It was considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. Sadly, it was taken to Constantinople in 426 BC and it was lost. Designed by Phidias and completed in 432 BC, it was nearly 12 meters high up on its pedestal. Just imagine looking up at it, plated in gold, with her hands, face, and feet made of ivory, and her eyes made of jewels. Now, that makes her a chryselephantine statue. Remember, we talked about that with the crying face of Artemis. By the way, there was another statue of Athena on the Acropolis, the colossal statue of Athena Promachos, also created by Phidias. That means she who fights in the front lines. The statue of Athena Parthenos, erected in 438 BC, was inside the Parthenon, while the statue of Athena Promachos, created in 450 BC, 12 years earlier, was an enormous bronze statue on the Acropolis outdoors, visible to ships at sea. Let me just tell you a little bit about what we are going to see. The Parthenon is made from pentelic marble, a very expensive material. All of this lavish white marble was meant to show off wealth, power, and victory under statesman Pericles. It was beautifully carved under the supervision of master artist Phidias. Now, we saw some of his work in part 1 with the lovely caryatids. We will be looking at 3 main parts of the Parthenon structure. You can see them here in this diagram. That is the frieze, the metopes, and finally the east and west pediments. I've got to say, as someone who guides the Parthenon sculptures in the British Museum, this is a much, much more beautiful and suitable gallery. The Parthenon Gallery is a glass atrium at the top of this museum. It has these wraparound windows that were built in alignment with the Parthenon. You can see this is very much intentional, and actually right now is the first time in a really long time that the Parthenon hasn't had any scaffolding on it. We can see it beautifully from here. The frieze wraps around the entire building, and we will see how it depicts chariots, riders, and regular Athenians approaching the Parthenon during the Panathenaic celebrations honoring Athena. It is highly unusual because it depicts both gods and humans in the same time and space. More on that later on. Now, this gallery here at the Acropolis Museum has the same dimensions as the cella, the actual temple structure, and the frieze panels are in the same places as they were on the building, just lower so we can see them better. There are 2 pediments on the building, the east and the west. These little models show us how they would have looked. Then there are also the metopes, that is, these squares, with statues in deep relief, almost carved in the round. In total, there were 92 sculpted metopes, arranged as 14 on both the east and west facades and 32 on the north and south sides. Now, before we have a look at these sculptures, let's talk a bit about damage and the shape that the structure was in the late 18th century. Now, over the centuries, it had fallen to wreck and ruin, partially due to earthquakes and partially due to changes in demographics and ruling powers. First, 6th century Frankish Christians used the east end of the structure as a Catholic church, called the Church of Our Lady of Athens, and then eventually as an Orthodox church. Over time, the Christians defaced some of the sculptures that they perceived as too pagan in nature. Then, between 1458 and 1833, Athens was ruled by the Ottoman Empire for 375 years, and the Ottomans converted the Byzantine-era church to a mosque, which still left a great deal of the original Parthenon structure to be used for other purposes, which, sadly, during the Sixth Ottoman-Venetian War in 1687, was a gunpowder store. Ugh. Now, after a Venetian artillery round ignited the gunpowder, the roof of the building was blown off, and the walls began to crumble. Hundreds of locals were killed as marble shards rained down from the hill, and the mosque inside was destroyed. A new, smaller mosque was established in what remained of the building, and you can actually see that here in this painting. In the 17th and 18th centuries, marble sculptures in Athens were being burnt to extract lime, and Ottoman soldiers were even known to fire off rounds into the sculptures as target practice. The city was officially liberated in 1833 following the Greek War of Independence. The second mosque was closed, and the Ottoman soldiers expelled. Interspersed amongst the Parthenon frieze, we can see these white plaster replicas. They're clearly identified by the token up in the top corners, and these signify some of the pieces that Lord Elgin removed from the Parthenon and took with him to England. You can see this very long stretch that was in remarkably good condition when Lord Elgin encountered it. Is all replicas here, the remainder of it, the real ones at the British Museum. And then you can really see the white plaster replicas and then the beautiful patinaed marble next to it. So wait, why are all of these Athenian sculptures in London? The time has come to talk about Scottish nobleman Thomas Bruce, 7th Earl of Elgin, henceforth known simply as Lord Elgin. Oh man, I've got to be insane to bring this man up in a Greek museum, but it's very important that we talk about him. He was very much a product of his time, and I tend to think of him as a greasy character who had his eye on his pocketbook while claiming to care about the greater good and preserving world culture. I want you to know right off the bat that his removal of the marbles from the Acropolis was just as controversial in 1807 as it is today. I also want to make it clear again that I believe in the repatriation of the Parthenon sculptures to Athens. I also have a video just specifically on this topic if you're interested in the controversies of the British Museum, and I'll just link that above. On previous trips, Elgin had seen what remained of the temple, and so before he departed for his role as ambassador, he asked the British government if they wanted him to take casts and drawings of the sculptures so they could be removed and brought to England. The government said no, but Elgin realized that he could do the removal himself for profit. He began by hiring artists to take casts and drawings, but soon began to remove pieces from the Parthenon and other nearby temples like the Erechtheion, a process that eventually cost him around £5 million in today's currency. He claimed to have full permission from the Sultan, and that permission would have been presented in a legally binding document called a firman. Now, contrary to popular belief, the British government did want to try to make sure that they were legal, or at least have a public face of legality. In 1816, the House of Commons held public hearings into his claims, and they were satisfied that a firman had been issued. Elgin testified that all removals were completed with the approval of the voivod, that is, the civil governor of Athens, and the dizdar, the military commander of the Acropolis citadel. He even claimed a second firman was issued in 1810 to authorize a second round of statue removals from Greece. Many Greek academics argued that these weren't firmans at all, but are instead a mektab, a letter, from the Sultan's acting Grand Vizier, and that it wasn't legally binding. By the time Elgin put his first display of marbles on in London, he was the toast of the town and held many salons for people to view the sculptures. That said, some people, such as Lord Byron and Percy Shelley, the Romantic poets, and I mean that in more ways than one, strongly objected to what they saw as the sacking of the ancient world for the benefit of the British. Eventually, in 1816, a House of Commons Select Committee ruled that the Parthenon sculptures were of high artistic value, and they recommended that the government purchase them for £35,000. Today, that's about £4.3 million in contemporary currency. Now, just to note that Elgin actually lost a lot of money on this process, but he was forced to accept this lowball offer because he was in debt from a costly divorce. Karma? Well, the Greeks certainly think so. Elgin is persona non grata here, and as you can see, Lord Byron, who of course also championed Greek independence, is a national hero. Other than the removal or theft itself, one of the chief complaints of the Greeks is the fact that Lord Elgin prized his off in such a thin amount to save room on his ship and weight. And you can see actually how deep the marble slabs were supposed to be. These were removed off of the actual temple in the 1970s in order to better preserve them. But this entire gallery, as I've said many times, has been designed specifically with showcasing them in mind. And again, we can see that these are the backs of some of the pieces that Lord Elgin left behind. He only pried off the front. Now, the Acropolis Museum probably isn't the place for a nuanced discussion of Lord Elgin. Now, was he a purely bad guy, just doing things for selfish reasons? Who knows? Maybe. Yes, I think Elgin was selfish and was exploiting his connections to the Ottomans in order to get these objects and bring them back to England. But did he genuinely believe he was saving them? He may very well have. He did see them in a state of ruin and decay after, this is only 100 or so years after the Venetian attacks, and they were in a very, very bad condition. And Greece didn't have an autonomous government of their own. The Ottomans weren't interested in saving them, so two things can be true. Elgin was dastardly, but he may have thought he was doing the right thing. Now, could he instead have fundraised money to help keep them preserved here in Athens? Yeah, that's what he could have done. You can see here it says, in the summer of 1803, Elgin's team used crowbars to exploit the natural cracks and prise them off of the wall. So, let's start having a look at the frieze. The frieze as a whole depicts the great Panathenaic procession, including more than 60 riders and tons of other wonderful details that are so easy to miss. The Panathenaic procession was the annual celebratory parade honoring Athena, but this frieze is really, really unusual because in addition to Athenian citizens, horsemen, musicians, and animals heading to the Acropolis, the frieze also depicts the gods themselves. Now, normally humans and gods don't mix in ancient Greek works of art, so that has led some experts to believe that this frieze is actually depicting a mythical procession populated with characters from popular legends. Little railing to help us get up close and have a closer look here. You can see these holes in the frieze, and these up in the top of the horse's head and down here in the hooves. These holes are where metal decoration would have been added. Horses' bridles and weapons. Now look at the front rider's raised hand. He was likely holding a metal wreath. It's now lost, as are all of the other metal decorations. Just look at the rider's bare shoulder. His chiton is slipping down. That's his garment. The musculature and details are just so breathtaking. His clawness, that's a type of cape, sails out behind him, giving the sculptor an opportunity to show off his talent. Heck, maybe Phidias himself carved this piece. It's beautiful enough. While most people believe he is a commander of the Athenian cavalry, his clothing also evokes Thracian clothing. He could be an ally in town for the procession. However, if you believe that this is a mythical procession, this could be Theseus, the mythical king of Athens. He's the one who founded the Panathenaic Games. Look around at the other men nearby here on the frieze. They are preparing for the procession, and they're just so human. They're preparing their horses, straightening their clothing. It's really a masterwork in imagination and maybe even sculpting from life. These men may have lived 2,500 years ago, but I feel like they could have been carved yesterday. Let's move over to the south side now. Remember, the original is at the British Museum. Now this is such a vibrant scene. I love the tilt of the cow's head. These three young men look like they're wearing what we usually call togas, right? A draped garment arranged over one shoulder. Well, the real name for these is a hamadeion, and I don't think a hamadeion party has quite the same ring, but they're preparing this cow for slaughter. No wonder he looks a little reluctant. He's going to be sacrificed on the altar of Athena Polias. Now, she's the aspect of Athena as the divine protectress of the city of Athens. This cow is just one of hundreds of the animal sacrifices that will be made to Athena during the festival. The meat would be shared around with the locals afterwards. The south frieze is also richly decorated with youths carrying trays of offerings, musicians, and other revelers. Let's move over to the east scene and to one of the most famous sections of the entire frieze, depicting the seated gods next to humans. Having them seated was the only way for them to be in the same scene as the humans, but also appear bigger, which was a requirement in ancient Greek art. Again, sadly, these ones are copies. The real ones are at the British Museum. Let's start here. Two young girls are carrying bundles of textiles on top of their heads, and next to them we can see a father and son. On the left is Athena, looking in the direction of the procession in her honor. She once had a bronze spear in her hand. Next to her is the metalsmith god Hephaestus. He has a crutch under his arm. He was actually cast off of Mount Olympus for his physical impairment, as he wasn't, quote, perfect. Now back to the human man. He is probably the leading Ahun, that is, the governor in charge of state religion in Athens. He and his child are taking this sacred peplos, that is, a robe, to place on the statue of Athena at the Parthenon, yet the real Athena is next to them. It's such a cool and unusual kind of meta scene. Let's finish over on the north side of the frieze with a beautiful scene. Three young men in hamadeions are carrying hydraea, that is, large vessels filled with water, as a part of the great procession. This water was crucial for blessing the altars and sprinkling on the animals brought for sacrifice, but it's hard work. As you might already know, I love pointing out little quirks in ancient art that connect us to them. People haven't changed. Look at this man here on the right. He has set his hydraea down, resting while he steels himself to pick up the heavy object again. We can see the flute of the figure just behind him. At least they had some music for their hard work. On this side of the frieze, we can also see more animals being brought for sacrifice, as well as a lot of chariots. The chariots were filled with athletes jumping in and out at high speeds, a purely Athenian sport. Now we're going to have a look at some of the metopes that encircle the exterior of the building. 4 groupings of metopes depict 4 major mythological battles. But it is more than war and battles. Instead, the figures seem to represent civilization versus barbarism, with civilization always narrowly winning out. This has been interpreted as a metaphor for the Persian War. They cover the Gigantomachy, Amazonomachy, the Trojan War, and the battle between the Lapiths and the Centaurs, or the Centauromachy. And Machi means battle. Some of the metopes are in such bad shape that we don't even really know what they depict. There aren't even casts of them here. Remember, this is due to the 6th century Christians who first established a church here. This painting by William Pars in 1675 shows that they were in this condition in the second half of the 18th century. On the east side, we see the Gigantomachy, which we talked about in part 1 of this video. There are 14 metopes here, and in each, gods are fighting with giants. It's a very impressive tale. Let's have a closer look at East Metope 14. This depicts sun god Helios rising from the sea on his chariot. We're going to see Helios do this again at the end of this video on the East Pediment. Look here at these holes. These are where the metal wheels of his chariot were attached. Helios emerging here marks a turning point in the great battle. Essentially, Gaia, or Mother Earth, wanted to pick up some special herbs to help her giant children defeat the gods. So to stop her, Helios delays sunrise to give Zeus time to pick them instead. Athenians would have been well familiar with this extremely complicated tale, so they would have known what they were looking at a glance. To the west, the Greeks are fighting their opponents in Middle Eastern battle garb. This is commonly thought to be the Amazonomachy, but it's hard to tell if these warriors are meant to be female Amazons or male Persians because they are very badly damaged. Most academics, though, do believe that these are the Amazons. Remember, in Greek mythology, Amazons are female warriors known for their strength and archery skills, thought to hail from somewhere around the Black Sea. The metopes here depict the story of the Amazons invading Attica to rescue their queen, Antiope, from Athenian king Theseus. However, Antiope renounced her female subjects to marry Theseus. Traitor. Here we can see an Amazon, her spear-wielding arm raised, charging into battle. Now this might be Antiope herself. Some of these metopes show the Amazons defeating Athenians, while others show equally matched fights. Now we're over on the north side. During the 1687 Venetian siege of Athens, the gunpowder explosion badly damaged the metopes here. Common interpretations are that these represent Menelaus and his neighbor Helen. Others say that it is Aeneas and Anchises. These are all figures from the Trojan Wars, and so the most common theory is that these metopes represent the fall of Troy. Let's stop here and look at North Metope 32. This is Hera, wife of Zeus, speaking to her daughter Hebe, goddess of eternal youth, on the eve of the fall of Troy. This really harkens back to part 1 of our video. Just look at the details on the robes, the quintessential classical Greek techniques and artistic styles. It's just so beautiful. Now, I mentioned that the North Metopes are almost unrecognizable, but this one remains at least partially visible. We think that the iconoclastic Christians may have left it alone because they thought that Hera and Hebe were the Virgin Mary and Archangel Gabriel, or at least they could pretend that's what they were. Finally, over here on the south, the southern metopes were mostly untouched by Christian iconoclasm, but they were badly damaged by the explosion of 1687, and then 15 of them were taken by Lord Elgin, and they're at the British Museum. These represent the fight of the centaurs and the Lapiths, the battle called the Sauromates. Lapiths are a legendary tribe from Thessaly who are slightly above human. Just look at the musculature of the Lapiths, but also look at the veins bulging out of the centaur's body. It's staggering to think that this was all done by hand. Now the Lapiths should know better than to give the barbarous centaurs wine, but they do it anyway at the wedding of the Lapith king Pirithous, thinking that the half-men, half-beasts will behave themselves at such an important event. They don't. They go berserk. At first glance, this centaur clearly has the upper hand. He's about to strike the youth with this tree branch. But there's a metal piece missing that tells more to the story. See, the Lapith is about to strike the centaur in the belly. Like the others, this battle represents civilization versus barbarism, with civilization just barely eking out a win. Now let's move to the east and west ends of the Acropolis Museum's Parthenon Galleries, and we're going to look at the east and west pediments. Behind me here is the west pediment, badly damaged by time and the Venetian attack. This one is sadly in terrible condition, but we do know that it used to look something like this. These models are based on travelers' accounts to ancient Athens. Some of the pieces of the statues are in the British Museum, the bright white ones. Elgin and his men left behind all of these bitty pieces and took the best with them. Classic Elgin. The replicas, as usual, are bright white, while the originals are the natural color of the marble. This scene of the West Pediment was very important to Athenians. It represents a contest between two great gods, Athena and Poseidon, to see who would become the patron god of this city. You might remember that this same story was told at the Hecatompadon, the temple on this site before its destruction by the Persians in 480 BC. Two legendary kings of Athens judged this contest, Cecrops and Erechtheus, along with their wives and children, and they're all depicted in this pediment. The gods decided to curry favor by presenting gifts to the city.
Poseidon offered Athens a spring of salty seawater, while Athena gave them the olive tree, and we know who won. I know it's really hard to tell, but this is Athena over here on the left, with her chariot mostly gone, driven by a winged Nike. Poseidon is on the right, with his chariot driven by Aphrodite, his sea nymph, Nereid wife. Hermes is over behind Athena, while Ares is behind Poseidon. They are the god messengers rushing to share news of the outcome. Let's see the judges, kind of. We'll see what's left. On the left are Pandrosus and her father, King Cecrops. Some of Cecrops' other children were also part of the scene too. Now over on the right side, there's the other judge's family. This is Arethusa, daughter of King Erechtheus, holding her twin sons, as well as her sister holding her son, Ione, and a few other unidentified figures.
Wow, I don't think I noticed this the last time I was here. This is really, really neat. This is one of the Acroterion that was on one of the corners on the roof of the Parthenon. Unbelievable.
I'm just so enamored with that Acroteria. That was one of the most startling things to see.
I am here during low season, but I hope you can see that even though this is one of the most famous museums in the world, it is nicely spaced out, not too crowded at all.
And we're here on the east side, the Pièce de Résistance. It's beautiful, but sadly it's also badly damaged and yes, sacked by Lord Elgin. I hope that sometime very soon I can see the originals here in this gallery. I mean, look at the setting. Let's consult with the model again to remember what this pediment would have looked like, and then we can see the setup here in the gallery. Most of the statues here are replicas.
Even though the pediment looks quite complete in the British Museum, they've shrunk it down and made it much more narrow so that it looks more filled out. But it actually has far fewer elements, pieces, than the West pediment does. It just has more full statues. Again, those are at the British Museum.
Look at the setup at the British Museum. They've arranged a pediment shape that is much more compact and only showcases the statues that remain, leaving out the central figures which are long gone. Now let's have a good look at this iconic scene, which depicts the birth of Athena from the head of Zeus on Mount Olympus. Let's start over on the far left. The head, arms, and shoulders of the sun god Helios emerge from the sea, and we can see two horses' heads. There were four. They are fresh and vibrant, ready to start the day. Next, we have the only statue to retain his head, Dionysus, reclining on a panther's skin. Of course he is. He is the god of wine, but he's missing his glass of wine in his raised hand. Next to him are two other infernal gods, that is, gods associated with the underworld. Persephone on the left and her mother Demeter on the right. Now, she's clearly disturbed by something she sees. A girl, maybe Zeus's cupbearer Hebe, rushes away from the center, or maybe this is Artemis. Now we know from the model that they are all shocked by the birth of Athena, which occurs in a very unusual way. Zeus is complaining about a headache, and so Hephaestus cracks his head open with an axe, and out comes Athena, fully grown and in battle garb. Sadly, this scene is lost to the ages.
A peplous figure of Hera, and the top of Hephaestus. Could also be Ares or Poseidon.
On the right side of the gap, this is Hestia, goddess of the hearth. And then the two figures carved from one block are likely Aphrodite, goddess of love, in the lap of her mother Dione. Finally, look all the way over to your right.
Just a little bit of the torso of Selene, the moon goddess. That's not in the British Museum, that's the original here. Two of the horses' heads of Selena's chariot, and then a plaster cast of the one that is quite iconic at the British Museum.
While Helios's horses are fresh and ready for the day, Selena's horse looks exhausted. His eyes are bulging, his nostrils flared. He is ready to call it quits. I call him the Friday afternoon horse. And he is the perfect place for us to end our tour. I hope we meet again to do another tour of this museum when all of the sculptures are repatriated from England.
And remember, scan the QR code with your phone's camera or click on the link below to join me over on June's journey.
Well, that's the end of our tour. I hope that you enjoyed exploring the stunning breathtaking and awe-inspiring Acropolis Museum with me, and I'll see you the next time I'm at the museum.